by the way, I just one word of criticism. I was given directions this morning to go to 64 Brent Street, and I just came down off of Golders Green Road, crossed over. Now, where I come from, which is a first world country, streets continue in the name. When you cross over, that begins Brent Street. You know, and I actually walked into an apartment complex over there. It said 64/57, walked up to the third floor as a private residence. Something called I don't know what the building is called. Right after you cross the North Circular, and the guy said, "No, this isn't Brent Street. This is Hovercroft Road or something, whatever that is," which doesn't make sense because it's all on one street. So I'll let you off the hook because I have been in Gateshead. And at Gateshead, there's actually a street that has two different names on different sides of the street, if anybody's ever been in Gateshead. So you guys have a ways to go. In any event, it's Elul. You could do tshuva. And speaking of Elul, I'll just tell you what, the attitude of Elul, Elul begins, we start blowing the shofar, and the entire idea of, the concept of tshuva. In South America, a Rav in South America was approached by a member of the congregation, and she said to him, "I have a question." He said, "Okay." He said, "In our family, we have a minhag that when Rosh Chodesh Elul begins, on Rosh Chodesh Elul, our family has a minhag for the month of Elul, we only eat kosher." So the Rav said to her, "And what is your question?" She said, "I want to know, does the minhag begin from the first day of Rosh Chodesh or the second day of Rosh Chodesh?" That was her question. So we understand that people take Elul, people relate to Elul seriously. And there was actually an El Al flight. There was a flight, and I was also on Rosh Chodesh Elul, and the flight had taken off, and it was like everybody was sleeping. It was the middle of the night, and it was just getting daylight, and people wanted to daven. A young man davened, and he decided he also wants to fulfill the minhag of blowing the shofar. So there he was on a silent, dark plane, and he davened and he pulled out his shofar in fulfillment of Uru Yeshenim Mishenaschem, awake, arise, O slumberers, right? Which they did. I think he's now in prison for disturbing. And that's all part of the fun. So Elul, you can imagine, I was laughing so hard when I heard the Rishon told this. So he was on the plane. The plane must have been rocking. Can you imagine? All of a sudden, there's a shofar blowing on a plane. At least everyone on that plane for sure did tshuva. At that moment, there's no question. Everybody promised Hashem the works, no question. So the question is, I want to get a little perspective on this. I think there is a certain degree, a certain amount of misunderstanding here. By Cain, when Cain kills Hevel, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Cain, "In teitiv se'es." If you do good, your sin you will bear your sin, and there's opportunity for you. You'll be on the right path. Im teitiv se'es, and then the Torah says v'im lo seitiv. If you do not do good, la pesach chatas rovetz, sin crouches at the opening. So one of the Meforshim asks, in Hebrew, if I would say to you, there's tov. What's the opposite of tov? The opposite of tov is Ra. Instinctively, we would say Ra. We wouldn't say the opposite of Tov is Lo Tov. We would say the opposite of Tov is Ra. Yet, that's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Cain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Cain, Im teitiv, if you do good, and then the opposite, Ve'im lo seitiv, if you do not do good. In other words, a Jew has to know there are only we have two positions. Position one is we are actively doing good. Position two is we're not actively doing good. And if we're not actively doing good, that by definition, that is our definition of Ra. Our definition of Ra is not actively doing good. There are certain times in life where you simply cannot be passive. Yiddishkeit is one of those times. Yiddishkeit is not, there is no neutral. If we're not going up, by definition, we're going down. And just as I would just like to say, I think that Rabbi Stepsky is a person who has filled a need here in London, and exactly that need of teitiv, that to take something. And there is no such thing as letting it go. He sees the need, fills the need, and I think that you are all recipients of his initiative over here. And the program should really be matzlech. It's something that's been needed for a long time, and you should all have a lot of hatzlacha with it. So in Yiddishkeit in general, a person, there was an elderly Hasidic Rav was watching a bunch of kids at the park. The kids were playing a game. There was a pole, and they were having contests who could climb the pole the fastest. And one kid kept winning the contest. He kept climbing the pole. So after watching this go on for a while, the Rav called him over And he said, I was watching you guys playing on the poles, over climbing the poles, and I saw you kept winning. And I'll tell you why you were winning. I was watching. Everybody else, as they climbed the pole, the higher they got, they started looking down. And as they looked down, they got a little nervous, and they stopped climbing. Their climb was impeded. You never looked down. You kept your eyes focused upwards. And the higher you got, you just kept looking, and you just kept climbing. So you kept winning the contest. The little boy turned out to be the Sfas Emes, and the elderly man was his grandfather, the Chidushei Arim. And the Torah, it's a secret to success in life. A person has to understand that the focus always has to be on constant growth. In Israel, we've taken guys from Or Sameach, we take them to various yeshivas. We take them to Mir, to Panovich, because it's interesting, a guy who's never seen a yeshiva, never seen Torah learning, never been observant, what his reaction is. In yeshivas, many people not observant, they think a yeshiva is a monastery. They're little, melty wax candles on the wall. It's dark and dingy and with candles on the wall, and a bunch of morbid people walk around with hoods, that sort of thing. That's what people think of monastery. Take them into a yeshiva, and you get hit by the energy of a base medrash. It's very, very enlightening for these people. So we took them once to Panovich. We took it once to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. Took the guys in. Guys who were completely unobservant. We took them into Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. Took a whole group in. And Rabbi Chaim gives them, Chaim is looking down. He looks up, gives them a bracha. And then afterwards I said to one of the guys, what did you think? He says to me, well, he was exuding something. I don't know what it was, but he was exuding. Walking to Rabbi Chaim, it's like somebody turns a light on. And you walk into the base. So they once took a group in Israel, took a group of Israeli soldiers, secular soldiers. They brought them into Panovich. So one of the soldiers, you walk into Panovich, you get hit by the energy of 800 people sitting and learning Torah, 1,000 people sitting and learning Torah, and they're watching these people, they're mesmerized, they're enchanted. And one of the soldiers saw a little old man in the corner, so he walked over to him and said, sir, could I ask you a question? How long have you been here? So he says, about 45 years. He says, 45, and you're still making progress? He says, Baruch Hashem, a little bit of progress each day, a little bit of progress, you improve every day. Turned out the little old man was Rav Shach Zatzal. He had approached Rav Shach, the Rosh Yeshiva, who had been in Panovich at the time. He was a young man of about 93. And, he approached Rav Shach, and Rav Shach felt that that's the message for us. The message for us is that on the one hand, we always have to know that there's no such thing as stagnation. There's no such thing as neutral. We are in a growth mode. That's the purpose of life, number one. Now, what the perspective I want to put on Elul is, there are many people get nervous during the month of Elul because we think of tshuva, and it's almost a Christian idea of, there's the devil with the pitchfork just waiting to toast us for our sins, and Rosh Hashanah's coming, bam, smash, turn up the flames. That's such an immature approach to the subject. My wife contends, and I know people in Israel, you see men in Israel who either get migraines in Elul, I get attack of gout, and my wife says I get the highest percentage of gout attacks in Elul. Because there's a lot of it is brought on by stress, that sort of thing. It's a mistaken approach to the entire subject. It's an approach, and we should mature our way out of it. The idea is like this. I think that all of you're working people, and you're probably busy 24 hours a day. And there's an idea, well, I'd like to learn more, and I'd like to daven more, and by the time you finish with work and you get home, and then there's a family, and you haven't even got time to eat a regular breakfast. Right? We're caught up in the race. So a person says, well, what am I supposed to do? Now the rabbi's going to get up and tell me to increase my learning time and increase my davening. What are we supposed to do? The truth of the matter is, I'm not going to tell you that at all. What I'm going to tell you is that even within the existing framework of a person's life, there are many improvements that are possible, none of which require an extra investment of time. I'll give you a couple of examples. How a person treats his wife. Now you're going to be around her regardless, right? You're going to be around. It doesn't change in Elul. It's not like, okay, I got to put more time into my wife. To the contrary, the best way to improve the marriage is put be less time around the wife. That will certainly improve the marriage, right? There's nothing like, the best recipe. Somebody once said they found the food that cures romance. It's called wedding cake, right? So the less time, so I'm obviously being facetious as I stand 2,500 miles away from my wife, but the trick, you're around your wife anyway. I always tell guys when people are married, I always ask husbands one thing. Take one question that I'll ask you. If this is all you hear in Elul, this is a great place to start. Take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, and I don't mean physically, by the way. Take a look in the mirror at you yourself, the person, ask yourself one question. How would you like to be married to you? That's all you have to ask. How would you like to be married to you? Right? Imagine you with your moods, anger, stinginess, unreasonable demands. How would you like to be married to you? Then you understand why we make a bracha shelo asani isha, right? Because they have to be married to men. I'm convinced that that's the real reason for the bracha. I'm convinced. Up until now, I wasn't sure. People always ask me why. The bracha shelo asani isha. Why do you make a bracha? That's what the truth is. The best explanation is the simplest. The best explanation that I've ever heard for Shelo Asani Isha is because if you'd ask who's got a more difficult physical existence, for sure women do, and all women will tell you that. And they have the difficulty of pregnancy, and then they have the difficulty of birth. I'm not blind, I'm not deaf. I've been in delivery rooms in the way to go. First time I took my wife in to give birth, so we walked in. I once said to my wife that I think that this whole pregnancy birth thing is just an attention-getting thing. Right? I said it once. I did a lot of tshuva, yeah. So we're going to go into the ward. I took my wife to give birth, and we're standing there, and the nurse is at the counter. She's filling in the form. And what's your middle initial? That sort of thing. And all of a sudden, I hear a blood-curdling scream, like that. And I'm looking for flashing lights, code blue, doctors running, and the scream stops. And the nurse looks at me. She goes, "Was that a B or a D?" And I said, "Well, that was a beat." We can't go. What was that yell? She goes, "What yell?" I said, "There was a scream down there." Oh, she says, "Oh, that's just a woman giving birth." Right? And it flitters through the mind. Shelo Asani Isha. That's not a joke. I'm absolutely serious about it. Shelo Asani Isha. I mean it seriously. I think that the real shot now, Shelo Asani Isha, because a woman has to be married to a man. Doesn't take up any extra time. To talk to a wife. There's a couple. A man came to a Rav. He said he wants to get divorced. So Rav said, "What's the problem?" He says, "My wife is always grouchy. There's no freshness in the marriage. It's kind of, the whole thing is stale." So the Rav said to him, "All right, listen, you have to, but in Judaism we take that seriously. Before you do, we have a concept called a name change. And when a person's in trouble, you change the name, changes the mazel, right? So what's your wife's name?" So the wife's name is Rivka. He says, "Okay, I want you to add a name. We'll call her Rivka Bracha." Okay, I want you to use maybe for a couple of weeks, just call her, we'll change her name, see if that helps. So the guy's enchanted. Wow, it sounds like a great idea. Change my wife's name. Okay, he says, the only thing is, to get used to her name, you have to practice. So what I want you to do is every morning, I want you to say to her, "Good morning, Rivka Bracha," for practice. And after the time you eat a meal, I want you to say, "Thank you for the meal, Rivka Bracha," just for practice. And at night, before you go to sleep, just say, "Good night, Rivka Bracha. Thank you for everything you've done for me during the day, Rivka Bracha," just for practice, just for practice. And then we'll see what happens. 2 weeks later, he comes back and says, "Yeah, genius, it worked. She's always in a good mood, and she's upbeat, and everything else." Sure, the guy up until that point was behaving like a boor, and now he's behaving like a mensch, which is all she needs. Doesn't take any extra time. So a person comes to Elul, how am I going to change? It doesn't take any extra time. It's a simple, very simple approach to the subject, number one. Number two, Rav Victor Miller Zatzal was in his late 80s, early 90s. And there was a surgery he had to go through. There was a surgery that was recommended. It was a risky surgery. And Rav Miller agreed to go through the surgery. So one of his close Talmidim said to him, "Why are you willing to go through the surgery if it's a risky surgery and it's not absolutely mandatory?" And Rav Miller said, "Because my wife wants me to have the surgery." So the guy looked at him and said, "You mean you have to have surgery for Shalom Bayis? You have to have surgery?" So Rav Miller said, "Much more than that. Much more than that." So I'm not saying everybody go home, Elul, okay, well, I'm going to the hospital, surgery. No, that's how you don't find an elective surgery. But a person understands that a person can do a little internal surgery. And it doesn't take much. In HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Reb Chaim Vital says that a man who does chesed with everybody in the world, you're the kindest, sweetest person, but you do not treat your wife properly, then after Me'ah Esrim, when a person comes up after he dies, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes all the chesed and tosses it out the window. Because it means that the other chesed was not sincere. You were doing it for ulterior motivation. Because if you really want to do chesed, the chesed opportunities are there constantly at home. Not speaking Lashon Hara does not take extra time. To the contrary, you save time. A person, you have your 2 halachas a day. I don't have time to learn my 2 halachas a day. Okay, you do, you don't. I don't think it takes that long, but let's say you don't. But as a policy, as a rule in life, just don't mention names. Just don't mention it. We don't need to talk. We don't have to say any names. That's all. Just don't mention it. The name comes up, change the subject. One of the areas that we're vulnerable by those when they come home from shul on Shabbos. Come home from shul on Shabbos, so they always announce the various mazel tovs in shul. Right? They say Shalom Zachar, they got engaged. So you come home and you tell your wife, oh, by the way, you got engaged. Really? I know his sister-in-law. I mean, I was not quite. Then you go off, you're off onto the gossip column, and we have a policy at home. Say Mazel Tov, and let's get on with life, which means bring out the food, right? Forget about Mitzvah Kiddush and bring on the food, and let's avoid the names. And again, I'm only mentioning an idea that a person goes into Elul, where am I going to improve? It's very simple. It's no extra time, and it doesn't take any energy to not speak the Lashon Hara. It doesn't take any energy. Somebody pointed out to me that in an office, in the workplace, a person understands. I didn't realize this goes on because I don't work. I'm a teacher. And as Woody Allen once said, those who can't do teach. Those who can't teach phys ed. Right? Woody Allen said that I actually majored in phys ed in college, right? And then I went and became a teacher. So I fulfilled Woody Allen to the T, but I've never worked a day in my life. So a person understands in the workplace. I didn't know this goes on. In yeshiva, it doesn't really go on that much. There's a certain amount of office gossip. Right? Somebody just pointed out to me that he's in the workplace, and the office gossip. Okay, a person could easily avoid that. It's an area that one could start. One last idea is the world of vulgarity that we live in. We live in a crude, vulgar, unsneous world. Now, there are certain things that a person can't avoid. A person can't avoid being out in traffic. A person can't avoid the street. A person can't avoid even in the workplace. There are other things that we could avoid. There are other things that we bring to ourselves in the way of vulgarity, and it doesn't take any energy for a person to avoid that. Anything in the electronics in that area that one could avoid. I personally do not even have a cell phone. When I'm in Israel, I don't even have a cell phone, not a smartphone, not any sort of phone. The reason is simple, because I figure if anybody when is the last time you had a call? When is the last time anybody ever called you because they want to give you something? Right? And I figure since the only people who want to call me will want something from me, right? I'd rather, my logic is if they need me, they'll find me. And if they haven't found me, then chances are they don't need me. However, you who are in the workforce, you obviously do need to be within communication, within contact, and accessible. On the other hand, a person could be accessible without accessing those things that are inappropriate and nobody is forcing upon us. And each person knows, Leiv Yodea Moras Nafsho, each person knows what area requires the improvement. This is all passive. This is all without adding 1 minute to our schedule. Now we'll talk about, adding a minute to the schedule. A person sometimes finds, I once heard, you're probably well known, what a person does in his free time tells you what this person is really all about. You often hear people the daydream, what would I do if I won the lottery? What would I do if I won the lottery? They talk about a guy in Israel who won, he won several million shekels in Israel. So somebody said, what are you going to do with the money that you won? He says, well, I'm going to pay off my creditors. I married off some kids. I'm going to pay off my creditors. He said, yeah, what about the rest? He said, well, they'll just have to wait. So sometimes a person... sometimes a person, I've won. What would I do if I won the lottery? What would I do? You hear these people win the mega bucks in the United States, 400 million. What would you do if you won the lottery? Right? The answer to that question, first of all, it should happen to all of us soon. Say amen. Now, the answer is, now, what do we do? I know you're wondering, well, how can we all win? Don't worry, Hashem is loaded. Don't worry. We could all win, and we'll all be happy, and then we'll meet at Bagels Bar. We'll have a great morning, and then we could, get some of the other stuff. At the end of the day, a person understands, what would I do if I had free time? I'm put to this test every time I come here. All of a sudden, I end up in London, and I'm out of my regular schedule, I'm out of routine, and I learn an awful lot about myself just when there's free time. There's what we call downtime. In Israel, there was a young man, his wife gave birth, and she went off to they call it in Israel, they call it a Beit HaChlama. Do you have those in London? What's it called? A convalescent home. For the women, they go in, and after 3-4 days, they go to relax. Okay, they have to get their energy back. She comes home. She says to her husband, young man Kolo, she says, look, you took care of the kids. It was difficult. I know you struggled with the kids. You were home by yourself. You did a great job. I remember when my wife, when she went and left me home with the kids, and she was giving me final instructions. And I remember I listened patiently and politely. She was talking about shampooing, washing, cleaning, that soaping, that sort of thing. So I listened to her, I let her, she spoke, and then I said to her, okay, I just want to get something clear. I'll give you back the kids happy and healthy, Bezras Hashem. But all those hygienic action verbs ending in ing, shampooing, cleaning, they ain't happening, right? Because I am a man, and I don't know how to do it, and I'm not going to do it. And by me changing clothes meant Reuven and Shimon change clothes. That was how we send them off to school. You want to wear pajamas? That's fine. I make a nasty corn patty in the microwave, right? That's what they ate for 4 days. So, but my wife, this lady comes up, she says to her husband, look, you took care of the kids. That was great. Take any hotel you want. Go close yourself in at a hotel for 3-4 days. You deserve a vacation. The husband says, you giving me 3-4 days off? She says, yes. So he says, okay, let me do it my way. He went to the gabbai of a small shul in Bnei Brak, and he said to this gabbai, he asked for the key to the shul. And he said to the gabbai, he got the key. The shul was not used during the week. He took a mattress, food, locked himself into the shul, and in the course of 4 days, he learned and learned and learned. He did a review of the entire Masechta Pesachim in the course of 4 days. Now, person has free time. Person says, well, I don't have any time. Sometimes we have free time. There's Shabbos afternoon, there's Friday, all sorts of time that we have. What does a person do with their free time? Sundays, what do we do with the free time? If a person wants to make use of Elul, then a person decides, I'm going to take a small step forward in my free time. If in my free time I did no learning, I could learn one Mishnah a day. One Mishnah a day is not a tremendous amount. I could learn a halacha a day. And always remember, gentlemen, Ein HaKodesh Baruch Hu ba betrunya im briyosov. God does not make unreasonable demands upon us. There are no unreasonable demands. If this is your life set, and this is where you are, and this is your family, that's all that's expected. But a person knows, I do have extra time. I could sneak in an extra parak of Mishnais. I could sneak in a learning session. I could sneak in another shiur. Each person knows where that is. One small step of improvement, in God's eyes, that's a giant step for us. And in Elul, it's not a question of, it's not a question of, I'm going to burn, I'm toast, I'm going to, avoid the punishment. In Elul, it's, let's take stock. Where was I last year as a Jew, and where am I right now as a Jew? Have I taken steps forward? Am I reaching a goal? Am I aiming at something? Do we have a direction? And on Elul is a time for a person to think a little bit, do I have a focus? Do I have a goal? There's no such thing as drifting through. How much time do I have? 3 minutes. There's no such thing as drifting through life. Go back to the lottery. What would you do if you won the lottery? What would I do with a lot of money? The answer is, we haven't always answered that question because we haven't won the lottery yet. If we were to win the lottery, we would be confronted with the reality of trying to define, what do I really want out of life? What do I really want out of life? I'd win the lottery. Okay, so we go, first day I would sleep in late. The next, it's like the lady in Chicago won $5 million. My lady won $5 million, so the cameramen were around her. I said to her, Mrs. Murphy, would you like to say something? She says, yes. Sears, Roebuck and Company, I quit. Okay, fine. That's what you did with you won $5 million. Okay, what do you do the next day? The next day you slept in late and read the paper. Okay, what do you do the day after that? What's the next step? A person thinks to himself, what would I do if I won the lottery? For many people, they wouldn't do anything different. Some people would back off and say, you know what? Now that I've won the lottery and I don't have to go where I'm being told to go, now I can identify, who am I? What is my real purpose in life? That's what Elul is. Elul is not about, you're going to hear all sorts of, tshuva and faith. Yes, that element is there, of course. But for us as individuals, we're honest with ourselves, it's really a time to tap in and identify who we are and what we want out of life and where we're going. Once we identify that, then the whole process of tshuva, which really means to improve, that whole process becomes easier. Because I realize if I see that that's what I want out of life, I want to be a better husband. I want to learn more Torah. I want to Dovid with a little bit more kavanah. I want to speak less Lashon Hara. Why? Because my whole goal is to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The whole process becomes easier. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help everybody here. We should all merit to improve. We should all merit to do tshuva. And I think that just the beginning of tshuva, be just a group like this, where there is so much available. Rabbi Stepsky, we're dear friends. Rabbi Stepsky is available 24 hours a day. His favorite time to be called is about 3:30 a.m. Anything you want to ask him, please feel free. And I'd appreciate if you'd answer my phone calls. I don't text. When I call you, don't just give me a message. Text. The easiest way to get all my text. I don't text. I left my textbooks in high school. Rabbi Stepsky is, he's available. He's accessible. You should help him to do tshuva. Take advantage of him. Help him to grow. There he is. And you should know that it's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks for us is to take a small step to constantly improve. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us all. We should be zocheh to a ksiva v'chasima tova and a fruitful, a beneficial year. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Kaplan. I know lots of people are under pressure, and family, the rest of the day is family time, people got things to do, the washing, the laundry, all the different things, all the exciting things we can do. I just can add one thing to Rabbi Kaplan's ideas, which came to mind, which emanated from Rabbi Kaplan, and it doesn't take any time at all, and that is smile. That's it, just whenever you just smile. It doesn't take any time, just so you smile at everybody, you see makes such a difference, just be simple. And I heard a beautiful idea. There was a Breslov chassid. He met a yeshiva guy during Elul, and the yeshiva guy says, "I don't understand." So he said to the Breslov chassid, "Why are you dancing up and down? It's Elul. How can you be dancing and singing and being besimcha? It's Elul." In my yeshiva, we're shaking. Even as he was talking to the Breslov chassid, he was shaking. It's Elul, just the words. He said, "I don't understand. What's the problem?" He said, "But we're being judged." He said, "Yeah, but who's judging us?" Our Father, Daddy's judging us. That's great. We've got good connections. Our Father's judging us. We should all be happy. And I heard a beautiful idea. Those who speak Yiddish, I'll translate afterwards for those who don't speak Yiddish, that Rosh Tevis El. El stands for, not in order letters, it stands for Lebedik und Warte Lebedik, which means be happy, live life to its full, and live it to the fullest.